I'm Katherine Spivey. This is a session on plain language from blah to brilliant. There's another class tomorrow afternoon on involving overcoming blah, so I'm certainly looking forward to that one. What are the odds of having two titles with the word blah in them? Who knew? So this is my first time at the National Association of Government Web Professionals and my first time in Pittsburgh. So this is all very exciting. We'll see how the room goes, how the sound goes, and I'm assured that we're being recorded. So if you don't want the back of your head to betray you, I'm not entirely sure what you can do. So let's see. What I wanted to start with is perhaps keeping my water with me is a wiser decision than I knew. What is plain language? How many of you had heard about plain language before you'd come today? Okay, one person, two, three. Where had you heard it? What had you heard? It's not a trick question.
Yeah. No, we are site-approved users.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a feature that was there. We've always been kind of focused on 508.
Yes.
And as we kind of took a closer look at what was going on with that feature, we realized we probably need to take a closer look.
Wonderful. We use Site Improve, or rather my team does, and I didn't know they did that, so I'm going to have to go ask them at one of the breaks to explain that a little bit more. So very exciting. Someone else, where did you hear?
I'm on this federal government Responsiveness.
Uh-huh.
So I've been hearing about it for years, and I understand the concept. I know the website. I absolutely agree with that, and I do whatever I can to apply it to our website too.
Fantastic.
I need more knowledge and more convincing
Mm-hmm.
to do.
Mm-hmm.
For our law workers and public information workers
Right.
and all the other entities that are supplying you with the content.
Great. Who else had heard about plain language before? Yes. Fantastic. Great. Very pleased you all showed up. It's exciting to have a way to talk about plain language with all of this. So the question always comes up, what is plain language? Because people have a couple of ideas about it, but what the working definition that the Federal Plain Language Action and Information Group uses, and which is quoted in the law, is plain language is communication that your audience can find. So no page 72 in the footnotes in a 170-page PDF. That's not easy to find, so it has to be easy to find. They have to be able to understand the first time they hear or read it, and they've got to be able to use what they found to meet their needs. So there's three things that are in play. And this is a working definition of what plain language is internationally. There's a number of plain language countries that have plain language laws. Some of them are more successful than others. And there's a number of groups supporting plain language and promoting plain language around the world. And one of the things you might hear or have heard already is it plain language, plain English, plain speak, plain writing? What do all of these terms mean? Well, the law itself, the federal U.S. law, is the Plain Writing Act of 2010. The group that supports plain language in the federal government is the Plain Language Action and Information Network. I'm only capable of talking about plain English because I don't know any other language well enough to be able to talk about it, insofar as plain. But other languages, other countries do have it. So you might hear like plain Norwegian or plain the Scandinavian countries have a big plain language component, as does Canada, plain in French and English. South Africa, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand all have very strong plain language components. So more or less, if I say plain language, it's plain English or plain writing. They're all working together. So these are the three working parts of the definition. And as I said earlier, it has to be easy to find. You have to put the important information up front. You can't make people search for it. If it were important, it would be easy to find. They have to be able to understand it the first time. How many of you get emails that take, an extra cup of coffee and 6 to 7 rereads with those? There was one horrible week, and I should say that I work for the federal government. I work for the General Services Administration, and my job is how I manage the web pages and the social media and data analytics for that branch of GSA, General Services Administration, that sells IT to the rest of the federal government. So my life is full of how do I explain cloud? How do I explain cybersecurity? How do I convey, telecom to an audience that may not be embedded in it? So that's what I do. I'm also co-chair of this Plain Language Action and Information Network, which means I do a lot of training, a lot of presentations, and a lot of rewrites. I spend my life in track changes, as do you, I'm sure. So one of the things that is the hardest to convey, come on in, one of the things that's the hardest to convey is what information are you giving to your audience? And I can't tell you the amount of times that I've gotten something that is all about, guess, all about the office. I used to work in the press office for the Department of Homeland Security, and we had, at that point, it's a number of years ago now, but we had maybe 2 million page views a month. And it was all about immigration and the border and infrastructure and all of that. And off to the side, we had a little thing called About Us. And it was the different offices, their divisions, the leaders, their biographies, things like that. Now, that was not getting quite the 2 million page views a month. But guess what the program offices gave us more of than the other? What were people sending us? New photos of their director. New speeches that he or she had given. New, mission statements. And we finally had to sit them down and say, hey, you're getting 300 page views a month. The area where you're spending people's tax dollars is getting the 2 million page views a month. Please put your efforts where your audience wants them. They really don't care about who's heading the office. Only you care about that. That was a hard conversation, but they were focused on delivering content that their audience did not want. So that is the hardest lesson. So plain language is when information is easy to find, you can understand it the first time you read or hear it, and your audience can use it to meet their needs. How many of you follow Jerry McGovern and his top tasks methods? Yeah. What are people trying to do? They're not, as I've had to explain to many, many people in my career, we do not have a fan club. Nobody comes to a government site, whatever, to just read what's there. People have something they have to do. And your job is to make it as simple as possible for them to do it. That's how you get your thanks. So, what applies to the federal government right now is, as I was explaining a little earlier, the Plain Writing Act of 2010. Now, what that said is that any new government document that meet the following criteria must be written in plain language by October 13th, 2011. Thank heavens we didn't have to go back and, do previous documents, although some agencies are working on that. But these are this is the material covered by the Plain Writing Act. Documents that are necessary to get government benefits or services or for filing taxes. People have a task they have to do. Documents that provide information about federal benefits or services. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits. Documents that explain to the public how to comply with a federal requirement. Those are the documents. Now, this applies both to paper, electronic, publications, forms, particularly online forms, notices, instructions, anything that would go to the public. And for GSA, my agency, the public is every other federal agency or any agency that does business with us. We do mission support. We help other agencies support their missions. So if people need buildings or they need, office space or something, they come to us. If they need telecom or wireless or cybersecurity, that's something we can help with. There's also, fleet and other things. But that is our public. Other agencies may define this differently. Now, one of the things also is that some of the states have passed plain language laws, but I can't give you a definitive group of which ones. I can't give you a definitive list of which states have done that. I know Minnesota has, and I believe that Oregon has, and there may have been individual counties and such like. But we're seeing more and more of a call as more agencies move to self-service on the web because it is cheaper. But if you're going to ask people to do business on the web, they have to be able to do it easily and not wonder what you mean by certain words or not understand what the next thing is. I was just talking to, fairly recently, a congressman's office who's wanting to sponsor a law called the TLDR law, which means too long didn't read. That, honestly, that was something. I think the story is that his son-in-law had gotten a form from Veterans Affairs, the VA, that said, if you don't send us this information we've requested back by date, then you'll lose your benefits or you'll lose a portion of your benefits. Unfortunately, this was not easy to find information. It was, on the 5th page of a 6-page document, and it was just lost in everything else. And so, he was going to lose his benefits, and luckily for him, he had a relative who could make laws, and the law is going to state, and I think it's just in committee now, but it's if there's a date and an action required by the person who receives the letter, you have to put that information in a box at the top. Like, respond by October 15th, 2018 with this information, or, you'll risk losing your services. So that's sort of a continuing development of plain language, although the Plain Writing Act has been in existence for about 7 years, maybe going on the 8th. So have any of you heard about the Plain Writing Act of 2010? Okay, so great. Just making sure that no one's freezing to death back in the back, just in case. Oh, one thing I should say is the final guidance on this was not in plain language, ironically enough, and it doesn't apply to Congress or to regulations. Just letting you know, it just applies to the federal executive branch. So I have started approaching plain language. I used to just teach the regular class, here's plain language, here's the definition, here's how it makes your life easier. And then I thought, how many times have I been given something? Nod when this resonates with you. How many times have I been given something and somebody says, post this on the web, the lawyers have approved it? Yep. Or your assistant commissioner signed off on this. Yeah. And you look at it and you think, no. So this is the plain language resistance movement. I know it says from blah to brilliant, but it's really strengthening your plain language resistance. because, I mean, sometimes, honestly, you can't do anything. You have to post it, and then you go and cry back at your desk because it's not helpful. You know your audience, you know this is not going to help them in any conceivable way, and you've had to mess up your perfectly good website with stuff like this. So, you know, who wants to read stuff that's not for you, or that's badly organized, or you can't comprehend how the sentences link to one another? You know, I know that we do a lot of scanning on the web, but when it's important, when it's something we have to do, then we break down and start reading, and we have to look at everything to make sure that we've caught what we need. So who wants to read this? Or how many people do not want to read this? Yeah, I want to read stuff that is very slightly easier to follow with all of this. So, how do you feel when you get bad material for your website? I sulk, you know. I also have a voodoo doll with a good supply of pens. We're laughing, but yeah, when those people down on the 5th floor keep sending us stuff and you're like, you know, this is still not helpful, and it's not helpful, you know, it's not any better than the previous 16 versions you've sent me. Oh, what do you do? What do you do when you get a lot of resistance to plain language revision? Now, sometimes you can get away with sending it back and saying no. Or you have to say this is not very useful, or this is way too much text. Or my current challenge, which is I'm getting a guy who, I have a coworker who wants to tell the potential audience, which is huge, all about cloud. And so what he's been sending me are essays. Yeah, everyone's like, no, how do you, people are not going to read this. They're going to look for something they can do. They're going to look for steps. They're going to look for links to ways they can buy stuff, because that's, you know, we did an extensive study of our web pages, and people come to research and they come to buy, although they have to buy on other pages, but research and buy. We don't have a fan club. We do not have people who are going to come and see John's latest email thought piece on cloud acquisition. It's just not going to happen. And so one of the ideas I have right now is maybe we move this to a blog. Maybe we move this to a blog series, because it's not appropriate for a website. Websites are for people to do stuff. So, you know, once you finish sulking, and it's an important part of the process, which is, you know, I have an idea in mind of what the website should be. Most people agree with it. This does not fit. This is like Sesame Street. How many of you grew up watching Sesame Street? Some of these things belong together. Some of these things are kind of the same. This doesn't fit. This is doing something else. It needs to go somewhere else. And, you know, the challenge, the creativity of our lives is finding a solution for where that content can be. You know, so where do you start? You start with the baby steps, honestly, because I'm guessing that many of you have the same experience I have with lawyers, acquisition, procurement people, people who write policy, and they don't necessarily welcome editing of any kind, much less plain language, with cries of delight and where have you been all my life, and let me bring you some chocolate and some flowers. No, that doesn't happen. That's, you know, my disordered dreaming. But, you know, we always hope that our efforts, as the previous speaker said at the keynote, you know, we approach our coworkers with compassion and kindness. And if we do the voodoo doll, we do it back at our desk. We don't take it to their cubicle and stick pins in front of them, because that's mean. No matter how strongly you are tempted, believe me. However, so one of the things, let me move back from this. One of the things that I have found to be very useful is to explicitly be able to say, I have not changed your words. Even if you're thinking to yourself, I haven't changed them yet, you can start with, I have not changed your words. This is something I got once in a blog. That's one of my jobs. I'm the plain language review step in the blog. Oh, and just to make sure everyone knows, I'm assured that the deck will be posted on the website. If you'd prefer me to email you a copy, there's a piece of paper floating around somewhere with email addresses. If you'd like me to email you one, I'm happy to do that. So this is something that I got, and I looked at it and I was like, blah, 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 which, unfortunately is my reaction to a lot of content, blah, blah, blah. But I thought, okay, I know this author is particularly resistant. I don't want to set up that particular conversation right now. Managing my own energies for that. So I said, what can I do with the simple enter key, which is my best friend? And I got this. Now, this is nothing extraordinary, and as I said, I have not changed words. But I've got a bulleted list. If you ever have done heat mapping like Crazy Egg and you've seen where do people's eyeballs, it's the eyeball tracking stuff, where do people's eyeballs go in content on web pages? They go to bulleted lists. That's one of the things that people focus on. People want to see those. If you highlight content like that out of a line by line, people are more inclined to see it. So there we have a bulleted list. And I've broken up the paragraph. Now here's where I play eye doctor. This or that. This or that. If anyone gets seasick, I think there's a bathroom right outside. Because I get seasick moving from screen to screen. But honestly, this, 2 paragraphs with a lot of content to think about, or this. So you can move. It's giving your reader a little breathing space. You're not shouting at them, saying, look at all my ideas, aren't they impressive? You're like, okay, here's an idea, and here's an explanation, and here's an example, and here's another idea. And here's a group of ideas all together, and then I've got a conclusion. So this is like the easiest thing you can do. What I consider, it's my Reagan moment, break down this wall. Break down this wall of words. Honestly, I've come into work and started up my laptop and looked at emails, and I'm just like, I've been here 7 minutes, and I already need an extra cup of caffeine because I don't know who's writing these 1-paragraph emails that I have to scroll on, but they've got to stop. It's a sign of respect. Give your enter key a workout. Break up things. It's a lot easier to move along that than to do what I consider the wall of words. This is the international symbol, wall of words. It's, make some line breaks your friend. And you can say, as you can see, I have changed none of your words, but I have given them some white space so they can be better appreciated. That works on lawyers, by the way. Yeah. Now, another thing, and I should add, I've got a group of websites to show you afterwards, after the presentation, but one of those is the plainlanguage.gov website, which contains, as per regulation, the federal plain language guidelines, which are sort of a longer explanation of all the techniques that I'm going over, which are pretty much in order, in this particular order, they're how easy they are to do. There's other ones, and I'll get to those later, but these are how easy you can make the change without too many people objecting. At least that's what I hope. A big one is pronouns. I had a big project that just finished last week, very exciting for me, where we're rewriting what's called the multiple award schedules, which is a way of people to buy stuff from the government, all kinds of stuff, and of people, particularly small businesses, to sell through the government. And, you know, that's what small business were looking for, you know, opportunities to do business. And one of the phrases I saw as I was moving through a lot of web pages was ordering activities. And, you know, I'm not an expert on schedules, so I was like, ordering activities. Is that like researching or actually like giving a credit card? So I contacted a person handling the project and I said, what is an ordering activity, or, you know, what is it? And she said, oh, it's a who. It's the person buying the thing. And I thought to myself, what? 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 She kept insisting, you know, and I said, you know, if you're a small business and this is your first encounter with the federal government, the odds that you are going to know what an ordering activity is right off the bat are really tiny. And she said, I never thought of that. I've been in the schedules program for years, and ordering activity just describes a person who's buying. And I thought, that's what happens when you get stuck in the Borg. Don't let it happen to you. Honestly, you have to, you know, check that, because I've been working with content and I'm like, yeah, that's what they usually produce. Yeah, I guess it's clear. And then it hits someone new and they're like, what is this? And it's like, oh, that went right by me. Dang. You know, you get used to it and you don't raise the eyebrow, you don't ask it, you know, you don't comment on it, you don't say, what is this? And that's what happens. See, my solution to that ordering activity issue was, can we use pronouns? Can we just say you? You know, when you come to buy from the federal government, this is what you need to do, boom, 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 that, you know, the steps and everything, and using second person command voice. And you would have thought that I had advocated, you know, let's put pictures of magical unicorns all over our acquisition pages, you know, which is not the same thing at all. We don't sell unicorns, for one thing, or unicorn equipment. But, you know, the issue is people need to see what they're supposed to do. They want to know, you know, is this page written for me? Is this something I'm supposed to care about? Is this something I have to do? And so it's really useful on pages where people are doing something. You know, this is something we have to do. How do we renew our car inspection sticker? You know, when I go to the DMV, that's something I want to know how to do. How do I renew my card if I've lost my password to the system? You know, all of those things. But I expect to see things that start with, have you forgotten your password? Get a new one. That's what I want to see. I want things focused on me, the consumer, not, let me give you the history of the DMV. Because I don't care. They could have sprung from mushrooms. You see, this is what happens when I'm stuck in a line for a long time. I consider alternate explanations of how they came about. They could have been landed by aliens who produced DMV stations. I don't care. What I want is just this. I just want the renewal. That's all I care about. So pronouns are a way to speak to your reader and to say, we're thinking about you and what you're likely to want to do on these pages, or at least what you can do on these pages. Here's how you do it. So pronouns are a big help. Yeah.
How do you feel about we versus the city?
What I can tell you is that for both federal agencies that I've worked for, Homeland Security and GSA, we decided as a matter of web style guide that since it was on a web page that had already, I mean, this was the very labyrinthine thinking, since we were already on a .gov site and we had the logo on every page that spelled out blah, 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 you know, who we were, that counted as first mention. And we are fine with we. I mean, there's only so many times you can say the office before it just starts to lose all meaning when you look at it. How many of you are using pronouns versus the title of the office or whatever? Yes, some.
We shifted on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it a hard shift?
It wasn't hard.
Great.
I was resistant to it initially. I thought
Yeah. You know, it's, I think the more people get used to self-service, web self-service, the easier some of those changes get, you know, which is all to the good. Another big thing, and I feel like I've been chasing this particular grammar thing. Oh, I should have said, this is not going to be a huge grammar fest. If you were expecting a huge grammar fest, I'm so sorry. Grab me for coffee later at the conference and we'll talk grammar for however long you like. Nobody ever takes me up on that offer, so I feel pretty safe extending it. Use active, not passive voice. Now, the quintessential, the best known example of passive voice in the government is mistakes were made. What is the beauty of that sentence? Mistakes were made. You shrugged? You just shrugged, like, what does it mean? Or a better question perhaps is, who made them? Now, passive voice is grammatical. There's nothing grammatically wrong with that sentence. However, there's a couple of other things wrong with it in that mistakes were made, or as I say, you know, somehow they got through security and they came down our hall and boom, a mistake. You know, it absolutely negates responsibility. Now, you can use passive voice for that, but that's one of the reasons we can't have nice things in the government. That's one of my sayings. Mistakes were made means we're not admitting who did it, or we don't know, which is almost as bad. But in case you are wondering what passive voice is, passive voice is when you can add the phrase by zombies to a sentence. So, mistakes were made by zombies. Who made the mistake? Zombies made the mistake. So, you can always rewrite a sentence. Now, there are reasons, sometimes, like 5% of the time, to leave a sentence in passive voice. You know, not as often as you might think. For example, if you honestly don't know the actor, you know, whoever performed the action. Remember that English sentences, this is again plain English, subject, verb, object. Somebody does something or is going to do something. And when you invert that, when you push passive sentences to your reader, they have to do the work of entangling all of those sentences. For example, instead of copies of tax returns must be provided. You know, if you've got something on your website and you're letting them know copies of tax returns, change that to send us or provide your tax returns or provide copies of your tax returns. You know, that's so your reader doesn't have to sit and puzzle out, what am I supposed to do in this sentence? You know, it's easier on the reader. You're making it easier. They have a hard enough time actually doing what it is they have to do or what you want them to do. Do not make it difficult by making the instructions unclear. That's just mean. You know, I'm assuming that what we all want is people to do what we provide in an email or on a website. That's what I consider transaction writing. I want you to do something. I don't want you to just know something. I want you to do something. And there are some people that whenever I get an email from them, just, you know, copies of your core warrant would be appreciated by this office no later than blah, 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 blah. And I just walk over and I say, what do you want? When do you want it? Great, thanks. But I hate having to do that. I mean, it's, you know, you're supposed to make emails are supposed to be easy. I know, I live in a dream world, but emails are supposed to be easy to understand. Web pages are supposed to be easy to understand. and follow. So questions about zombies or passive voice right here, since we're at a convenient stopping point? Is everyone going to remember the zombie photo more than anything else? I knew that was going to happen. I get the most retweets on that, by the way, the zombies, by zombies. So also, and this is as we move further into what people are reading, what people are doing, work on emphasizing verbs, not nouns. You know, it's just a way of making sentences shorter and mostly clearer. You know, and if you have shorter sentences, you will have shorter paragraphs. Also a handy thing to have. And it's difficult if you've turned your if you've turned your verbs into nouns. I was listening in on a webinar, and I knew my boss was on the line. And we'd had, I won't say run-ins because she was very gracious about it, but she had always been very fond of, instead of saying, we concluded or we decided, we came to the conclusion or we came to the decision. And, you know, I would mark it up and, you know, she would just sort of, I guess, accept it or whatever. But on the webinar we were on that we were listening to, we were also chatting because GSA uses Google Chat. And the person on the webinar said, I will conversate with you later. And since I'm a person whose business is words, I nearly fell out of my chair. You know, conversate. And Dina had chatted me, conversate. And I was, you know, thinking about it. I said, well, conversate presumably from conversation, but there's also talk or speak or something. And so Dina just sort of left it with conversate. And, you know, that hovered over me like a little cloud for a couple of days because I kept thinking, conversate. I mean, you can even say converse. But it made me realize that maybe some people did not know how you could make verbs into nouns and vice versa. And so there's rescuing hidden verbs. There's a lot of that in the government, you know. There's some easy ways to tighten your sentences and to make them shorter and, you know, keep the subject and verb together, which is a lot easier on your reader. And I should say, too, this is part of your editing phase. Nobody does plain language right out of the bat. I write, you know, as bad a draft as anyone else. But I go back and I say, okay, I have said, present a report, and I can turn that into a verb, report. I have said do an assessment, and that can be assess or test, and certainly not conversate. I don't even write that in drafts, but, you know, that's just me. So there's also, and I use this with a lot of things. Can I borrow someone's pencil or pen writing? Thank you so much. Yep, total victim here in the front seat. I used to teach at the Quantico Marine Corps base at the Amphibious Warfare School, and I was essentially teaching plain language. And one day, one of my students said, I know the difference between use and utilize. And I thought, hot diggity, you have the class, please explain. He said, if I take a pen and I write with it, I'm using it because it is designed to be a writing instrument. And so we all said, yeah, with you so far. And then he said, remember, Marine Corps, he said, if I poke your eye out with it, I'm utilizing it because it's not primarily designed to poke people's eyes out. That has stuck with me for a good number of years. Thank you so much. No teachers were harmed in that example, so just letting you know. But words have meaning and words can have weight, and it is often useful to look at your sentences at the sentence level to say, are these words earning their keep? Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes. Yes, I looked it up in the dictionary. I had a surprising number of students in my class whose mothers had been English teachers, and it showed. You know, there were certain discussion points they brought up which were different from the non children of English teachers. There's apparently nothing you can do about English teachers. It goes everywhere. So, another element in your web writing, and I'm speaking specifically of web writing, although I know it can be letters or emails or forms or what have you. Watch the jargon and acronyms. Is what you know necessarily known by your audience? You know, it's very easy to say to your coworker, and it's perfectly all right to say to your coworker, hey, let's do a 502 on that PIP memo, you know, because they know what you're talking about. If you say that to someone who is not your coworker, or at least not on your team, what are you going to get? Well, what? You're going to do a what to a who? I mean, confusion. And it is very important to remember, very necessary to remember, that not everyone knows your jargon. Remember the ordering activities example? Not everyone knows your acronym. Not even one division of your agency knows another's acronyms necessarily. For example, I was working with our telecom group, and they had a new thing that they were very proud to be offering, our customers. And they said, we need a web page, here's our content for it. It was dispatch handling services, which they were calling DHS. And I had to say, guys, I kind of think the Department of Homeland Security has that acronym locked down. Maybe it's just me. And they were absolutely astounded that in 6 months of working on this, they had never thought of it. Never, ever, ever. So one of the benefits that you provide as a plain language reviewer or rewriter or editor or whatever you're doing for that is to be able to say, this could be misinterpreted. Maybe we can find another, and you can almost always find another way to say it. And the way we solved this other one was we added the word network. So network dispatch handling services, and we had a new acronym, and everybody was happy and nobody was confused. That's what we care about, people not being confused. So jargon and acronyms are what government entities at whatever level are best known for. I used to work on a program called First Fridays, which was our phrase, GSA's phrase, for testing a federal website every month, the first Friday of every month. And we would do everybody. We did Veterans Affairs, we did the passport section of the state.gov, State Department. We did usajobs.gov, its own particular circle of hell, by the way, and just different ones. And they were always top 10. We always presented a discussion and a report of what are the top 10 problems that you observed during this usability test. And among the top 10, sometimes in the top 5 there's just way too much content. There's just too much information for what people wanted to do. Or there were too much jargon or too many acronyms. So you have to look very closely. And this is how you start. This is the process of not just posting what you've been given, but actually looking at it critically in the sense of, does this make sense to your audience? And of course, you have to at least have a rough idea of who your audience is to be able to do that. But to have an idea of, will this work for your audience or not? Now, you should always, of course, be trying to support research into your audience and what their needs are and what they want out of your website, what they want to do versus what you want them to do. Although sometimes we all have to go to the DMV in person. There just doesn't seem to be any way around it. But, you know, you have to look at, is this going to work for the person who has to use it? And you need to be their advocate. Now, I'm not saying, although I've done it, I'm not saying rewrite everything your coworkers give you, because, you know, there's just not enough time in the day. But you can share the principles. You can say, this is the problem I'm seeing, or I think this might give the wrong impression, or my favorite, that link is broken. You know, if you send people to a link, it needs to work, and it needs to go to the right thing. So you are the reader's advocate as you are working through these things to do. And it will remove the blah as a byproduct. And I can't promise you, because I have a lot of problems with the word, I can't promise you delighted readers. Because anything involving the DMV, I'm not going to be delighted about. I don't care how seamless it is. It's just not a place of delight. But if I go back, you know, I drive back from my trip to the DMV doing whatever, or I get out of the website and says, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. That may be as good as it gets. You know, I can't promise brilliance with everything, but it can be painless. Yeah. So watch the jargon and acronyms. Don't play Scrabble with your readers. I mean, if your users, if they come to your house and you play Scrabble, that's fine. But, you know, don't run it over them. Yes?
Sorry, back to the NVHS acronym.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing that's internal. That was internal.
No. That was going, I mean, it was in accordance with usual acronym use. It was spelled out on the page, Network Dispatch Handling Services in DHS, and then they just referred to it as in DHS or it or the service on the rest of the page. Yeah. Sorry.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
How was it incorporated as part of the acronym in your
Yeah, the usual practice. Although one of the things we're discovering as more and more people are using electronic devices, and this is something that we track. We look at it every month. Who's coming to our website on smartphones? Now, not very many, you know, but we keep an eye on it. And when we get to a higher percentage than what we have, we're going to have to reconfigure how we do. I mean, we're already mobile responsive, but there's still a lot of material in there that I think is probably better desktop, like some of the forms, you know, some of the ordering. But it's something to consider, because the more mobile users you have, you need less text. You know, because we went to accordion menus on a lot of our pages so that people could get more content if they needed. But, I mean, they're not going to scroll infinitely. I mean, and this is something that we're learning from, like I follow the Pew Internet Research people and some of their reports on the state of, you know, mobile and the state of websites and things like that, because it all feeds together, because our audience's expectations rise. You know, why isn't it as easy to chat with, you know, my federal colleague on order support as it is with my Cox cable guy, although that's a painful experience too. But I mean, that was one of the things that drove us to starting a chat feature on our government pages, because people were saying, hey, I can do it with my local cable, why can't I do it with you guys? And we were like, I don't know. So, you know, that's what we started. But people's expectations on what they're able to do on the web are rising all the time. So, getting away from Scrabble, it's important for you to use real words, because you're dealing with real people. So, as you can, and I realize that this is the whole Rome wasn't built in a day, and you have to eat an elephant one careful forkful at a time. It's not, you can't just sort of bust into your office. Well, maybe you can. If you do, great. You can teach this next year. But you have to start with things that people are actually reading. So, you know, what I usually say is look at your analytics. What are the pages people are going to most? and spending time on, or what files are they downloading, and work on those. Like, one of our biggest things was, I don't care about certain landing pages because they're just pointers. People are just, oh, here, there, and they're just being signposted. But like our ordering guides, where people have to read them and follow the directions and, do a lot of what I consider boring, tedious stuff, that has to be clear. We want people pulling out their credit cards and say, yes, I'll have half a pound of cybersecurity, or, whatever it is that they want. I don't want them wondering, well, how do I get this again? Whom do I have to contact? What? I want that clear. So look also, if your files release it, we've had some difficulty because federal websites can't use cookies, or it depends on the agencies whether you use cookies, and we have chosen not to. So we have to sort of do network groupings. We can't narrow it down specifically. So that also keeps us from getting very specific Google search terms. Either that, or people are using Google to get to us anonymously, and we can't capture their search terms. But that would be useful, because we could find out, are people searching on ordering activities? Because really, that's what people, people ask for evidence, and it's really helpful if you can say, well, nobody's searching for this, or my favorite, they're misspelling it. Yeah. Real people, this is what you have to remember. We don't live in a perfect world where people are solely giving you their attention for a set amount of time. They're busy. They have a lot of other things to do, and they don't care about your org chart or your history. I'm going to get a tattoo one day, and that's going to be it, because people want to do a lot of, well, somebody got a promotion. And I'm like, we only list our assistant commissioner. We're not listing anybody else because you guys keep moving around. That I didn't say, but, we're only listing the top person because, can't be bothered. And fundamentally, they do not have time for your agency's nonsense. This is a slightly different issue, but one of the things I've discovered is people want to get in and get out. Think about how you are on Amazon. Do you want to read about the history of Amazon when you actually just want to order a book? Or, in the case of my husband, several books, and a bag of flour, and maybe a spoon. I don't know. But, he does not want to hear, what's the mission statement of Amazon? What's the goal of Amazon? Obviously, our money, but they make it really easy. And we should be making things easy for our audience as well. And one of the things that I've discovered, and this is sort of a painful lesson for everyone involved in web content, is that websites magnify organizational problems. Yeah. I used to work for an association that provided a lot of training to a law enforcement audience. And there was training you had to pay for, there was grant-funded training, and then there was free training from somebody else. And they all, because this was the early days in the web, they all wanted their own section on the home page. Of course, because that's what people do, and I had to tell them all. Luckily, my boss was firmly behind me on this one, but I had to say, when they call, I was using the analogy, when they call the office, they just ask for training. They don't care. It could be paid for by Keebler elves. They don't care. They just want training. So all of you guys are going under training. You're going to do one big calendar because that's what people are looking for. And so, again, you are your readers and your users' advocates. You have to stick up for them and to make sure that they are not being subjected to nonsense, as I put it. So the hardest part, and this is, generally I do this first, but this whole scheme was based on what's the easy steps you can make that so people are not noticing that you're changing their words. Start with the enter key, change things to pronouns, break things up, focus more on verbs. You can say, I'm still catching the sense of what you wanted to say. but write for your audience. I mean, if you fail there, it doesn't matter about your sentence structure, your word choice, anything. It goes back to, can they find the information they need? Can they understand it the first time? And can they do something with that information? Again, no government website has a fan club. None of them. Sorry. If you thought there was one, very sorry. And even worse, the burden of performance, the burden of plain language is on you. Because the last time I checked, there is no magical keystroke or button on your keyboard that will make all of these happen. There's not even a macro. You really have to look at the words. You have to look at each sentence, and you have to clean it up and move it around and all of that. So, from blah to brilliant, or at least painless, but it's on you. Do you have any questions? Yes?
Do you have any suggestions on how to get people to buy into that? We've been doing this for
Yeah.
trying to do this for a while, and there are just some.
I like the idea that I'm gonna go back now and just tell them all that there's a federal law about plain language.
Well,
They don't have to know that it doesn't apply to us as a city.
I'm completely in support of Machiavellian responses. I did mention the voodoo doll before. What I have found, and this is based on federal government experience, association experience, is it really helps to do a couple of things. Talk to your users. Talk to the people who answer the phone at your agency and say, what are we getting questions on? When I worked for the association, we had a huge conference and exhibit every year. And it was a crazy time for staff because, starting August, we'd all get gray and, hunker around and, bad things because it was very stressful. Our voicemail boxes would fill up. So I went to the conference people. This is like the first, maybe the second year we had a conference. That we had a website. That's how long ago it was. And I said, what are the questions you're getting? And I got 4 or 5. And I said, let me put that on the web. And then I sent an email to everyone saying, hey, this is information I have on the webpage, the icp.org/conference. And put it in your email signature and change your voicemail message to say, a lot of your questions can be answered at this webpage. I had a week of being the most popular person in the entire 5-story organization because people got the answers and they didn't have to call. They were happy too. But they got their questions answered on their own. They didn't have to call and get a call back. They didn't have to email and get an email back. So talking to the call center or the people who answer the phone is really helpful because you can say, what problem are you getting the most calls on? Let's fix that. That's analogous to looking at your data. Look at the web pages, yes, but look at the file downloads. We've done about 3 what I call refreshes, where we go through and we share, say a year, 2 years worth of data, and we say, hey, no one has downloaded this file in 6 months. And we were expecting, a battle. We were expecting to have to. But, we showed them the data, and they were like, well, take it off. If people aren't using it, we don't need to keep it. And, that was astounding. So data, helping your colleagues solve the low-hanging fruit, as they say. There's another thing also sort of related, and it's related to the cost of maintaining content. People say, oh, just put it on the web because it is a lot easier and, better for the environment than printing it out and mailing it to people and things like that. But you also have to ask, is this getting in the way of somebody else doing something? Is this interrupting a search result to better content? And so every, I would say, year or so, I say, it's time to do some spring cleaning or fall cleaning, depending. Or this month is pretty quiet. Let's all look at our web content and say, you have to prune, and it helps to have some metaphors that people do, but you have to prune. You have to vote pages off the island. You have to say, this file is no longer earning its keep, or, whatever it is. And to just get people used to, you just can't post it and abandon it. You have to look at it all the time. And that is something that a lot of people don't want to learn. But I start off my digital meetings, when I'm talking about the analytics, and we meet every month, I say, so, the website is not a billboard. That's another tattoo. Website is not a billboard, it's just, not. And you have to cut it. You have to keep it trim, or lean, or agile, or whatever the phrase is. Is there another question? Yes? No?
I have one about whether or not you know of any research or you've seen any kind of statistically significant data around the quality of translation on the website when you use plain language. We have a city with a very, very diverse population,
Mm-hmm.
so I've really used that as kind of my rallying cry that
Yeah.
it helps people who English is not their first language.
Yes.
A lot better for their use. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of research out there that I can point to help.
I don't have to deal with translation, so I do not, but I know someone who does. I have been passing and will continue to pass out to anyone who wants it, these little stickers, plainlanguage.gov. We had a federal government summit in July, and one of our speakers was Laura Godfrey, who does a lot of translation, who manages a great deal of translation for you. I think it's USA.gov. And she has some of the research, which I do not have. So, you're all welcome to, I guess this is a good time to go to the URLs that I have. Okay. This is the Plain Language Summit, and it has a whole, everything that we had there, which is also some of the neuroscience findings about plain language and understanding and the translation issue. So you're certain that. It's also linked on the website plainlanguage.gov, and it's under, thinking. It's under the videos portion. So there's a couple of YouTube playlists as well. Also, we had a meeting that you're welcome to look. You're welcome to look at anything on digitalgov.gov and plainlanguage.gov. They're open. There was something on infographics and plain spoken science. So, a couple of free training things right there. And anything on digitalgov, you're welcome to sign up for. They've got tons of stuff and upcoming training. You can sign up for these things. And it's generally just remote. You don't have to show up in person, which is fortunate because, so you can certainly take a look at that. So I think that summit would certainly help about the translation. Was there another question here?
I never thought of it until now, but that question, and you think that, I bet for people using screen readers,
Yes.
it's a world of difference.
Yes.
Because, the few times I've tested it, when it reads a paragraph, it's a bing, with no stopping, no interruption,
Yes.
and then,
Yes.
holy cow.
Yes.
But for it to read this would be so much easier.
Would be a lot easier. And obviously, the plainer it gets, generally, though not always, the shorter it gets. And so if you're paying per translation per word, which is one of the models, it's cheaper. But yeah, if you can get it down to being clear in the original, the later ones will be easier. The other languages will be easier as well. Let's see, there was, other questions? I wanted to show you a short YouTube video. This might help. You'd be astonished but USCIS has a lot of really good plain language videos. And this is their newest, and this is key, I think. And you're obviously welcome to go to YouTube and use these too, but it's, well, wait a minute. Am I going to be able to do this? Yeah. Sometimes videos can be tricky in areas. I'm not going to show the whole thing, but oh, the problem is my sound. Sorry. Oh, no, there's another issue. Oh, well. It's always something. So at any rate, this is a really good one about how to put your main message first. And they also have my personal favorite, the active voice video, which you don't have to listen to it, but you can look at all the backgrounds, which is the putting all song titles into passive voice. So if people are having difficulty with this, you will be watched by me. Only fun is wanted by girls. The Ritz has been put on. You know, this is an easy way to get a grammar lesson through. My personal favorite, the sheriff was shot by me, but the deputy was not shot by me. So, you know, hours of endless amusement for you at the USCIS plain language playlist on. I am also told that I need to remind you to do your conference evaluations. There's a little tabletop. There's a QR code reader, and I believe you can do them on here as well. So, yeah, they want you to do the evaluations. So that's what I had. We have a few more minutes before lunch. I'm going to pass out the rest of my stickers to some of the people who didn't come. If you have a question, let me know. Also, I'm on Twitter at Katherine Spivey, so if you have a question, you can follow me and DM me. Or if you go to plainlanguage.gov, sorry, I always forget my mouse when I travel. You can email us. You can email me. I'll get the email down here. So.